What's going on? We're here with another episode of Made in New York podcast. Today's guests, I have Nick and Luke from Pioneer Communities. Say hello, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and so on.
What's going on? Pioneer Communities was founded pretty recently, about 5-6 months ago. Right now we're focused on the acquisition of mobile home communities nationwide, so mobile home parks and multifamily.
Okay.
We operate here in New York, and we're pretty much focused on nationwide acquisitions right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'll sort of segue into just sort of our backgrounds, I guess.
Yeah.
How we got into this. So as we were just discussing, I grew up in upstate New York, about 100 miles north of the city. My grandfather and father were both in real estate and sort of grew up in the business. After graduating from school, came down to New York City, sort of got the real estate bug, working for a firm in Brooklyn doing some developments, Cayuga Capital.
Okay.
So I was an intern there over the summer in school. Sort of really knew that I wanted to go into the real estate business. And immediately after graduating, I was able to network my way into a position at a small private equity shop here in the city with just one principal and myself, just sort of overseeing the acquisitions that he had taken down over the previous 5 or 6 years. So we had a portfolio of about 10 buildings. I was doing acquisitions and asset management for him. While I was there, we acquired probably 4 or 5 properties over 5 years. We did some private lending as well, and was involved in sort of every aspect of the business, from sourcing deals to underwriting deals, financing, investor relations, and then once we had acquired a property, managing the day-to-day operations, project management, renovations. So really soup to nuts. It was sort of the best experience,
Right.
Hands-on experience that I could have gotten. I think I owe a lot of the knowledge that I have today to the principal at that firm. He's an extremely knowledgeable and nice guy. The goal was for me always to go out on my own, and I've always sort of had that entrepreneurial bug. I always wanted to go out and sort of make something, make a name for myself. Luke and I connected actually through Instagram, probably about halfway through my tenure at Citi Urban Realty, and we started bouncing ideas for acquisitions off one another, and both sort of got to a point eventually where we were both sort of in the same spot and ready to make a jump. Wanted to focus on acquisitions full time, and we made the leap in early December. And it's been great since. We'll sort of dive into the details. I'll let Luke introduce himself and his background.
Yeah, so like Nick just said, we met a couple years back, started discussing acquisitions from the get. We even started trying to work together as firms. So I was on the finance side when we met, and he was on the acquisition side. So his firm came into my firm, and we were chatting. And I was actually, my firm was not I was overseeing it though. I saw a mobile home park deal while I was there. And I remember thinking to myself, because I was on the debt side, so I was taking a look at the debt, and I remember thinking to myself, how are these people getting 80% financing? That was my main question, because we weren't even seeing that on multifamily product. And what someone said, one of the principals at the firm, was that these things are very financeable and the banks love them. And so right there, there was kind of some interest that was planted. And I know Nick had also seen something by way of his father, who's also in the industry. And so when we connected, months later on this front, we kind of just went full force. I mean, we both left our corporate jobs prior to working on the finance end. I was on the development side. So I was in one way or another, I was in real estate for about 4 or 5 years, similar to Nick. And we felt like the marriage of the knowledge that we had kind of acquired during that time frame was enough for us to go out on our own.
Cool. So, Nick, let's talk about this. Dad and Grandpa both worked in the business.
Yep.
What did they do?
So my grandfather immigrated here from Iran during the revolution in the early 70s. He was actually a doctor by trade, an anesthesiologist, and was a diligent saver and invested all of his savings into real estate in upstate New York. Various different types of product, multifamily, office, a little bit of retail, some industrial stuff. So unfortunately, when he passed on in his 60s, my father took over the holdings with his 2 brothers, and I was pretty involved growing up in managing, the operations of those buildings. I was always, taking trips with my dad when something would go wrong. A boiler would break or something, and I'd be taking the trip with him to go meet a contractor and get a quote.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd sort of always been involved in that process, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's sort of ingrained in who I am. So I just didn't really know anything else. But I've also, I also love it. I was never sort of forced to be in the real estate business.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't forced on me at all. I was always told by my parents that I could do, whatever it was that I wanted to do. But real estate is my passion. Again, it's what I know. And that's, again, what led us to go out on our own.
That's very interesting because I grew up in a similar situation. My dad had been my dad's a broker 15 years longer than I am at this point.
Okay.
He's with Citi Habitats only a year longer because he had put his first 14 years in Queens.
Yep.
But like I remember as a kid helping him do shit in the office and pass out flyers and being at open houses. Probably shouldn't have been legally, but that's a whole other story. And it's like I never thought real estate. I was like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I was like, that's my dad's thing.
Yeah.
And when the recession hit in 2008, I lost my job. I took some time off. I went to Africa, and then I was like, you know what, fuck it, let me try this. And it's very addictive.
It is.
I strive on like the deal making and the negotiating. Like it
The art of the deal.
drives me.
Yep.
But it's very interesting to hear the other side where it's just like you knew that this was what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So both of you come from different backgrounds. You
Yep.
meet. Talk to me about the decision to like form this company and like really go and what that meant to you, both having come from the corporate world.
Yeah.
Sure.
It was. I'll speak for myself. I think it was relatively frightening at first.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of comfort that you get. It's kind of like there's two sides to it. There's a lot of comfort in terms of having a place to go and you have a paycheck. So financially, there's a lot of comfort working for someone else. But at the same time, Nick touched on the entrepreneurial bug that he had early on. I had the very similar bug, and I found that when you suppress that bug, it's impossible to be happy working for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I would show up to work and like I loved what I was doing, but I knew that there was more.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of fear leaving Launching Pioneer, going out on our own. We eat what we kill. We work around the clock, and we don't have an income per se.
Right.
And so that part was scary, but in listening to other people who've done it and hearing about their success and about their struggle, I think we were pretty comfortable like making the jump when we did.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was actually listening to a previous podcast of yours with Dave Amirian, who Luke and I have both met on a few
Really
occasions.
cool guy.
Great guy.
Very humble.
Great guy.
And it was just funny to listen to it because he was talking about the same thing. He was sort of in the same position that we are now. A bunch of years back. And again, it was just funny to listen to him and hear, the sort of trials and tribulations that he went through to get where he is today. And again, it's very similar to where we are. But it was definitely a scary feeling for me as well too. I'm one of the people that believes that if you wait until you're ready, you'll be waiting forever. So I just like to make the leap and do things sort of my own way. But Luke and I really sat down together and we were looking at a bunch of different asset classes, and we really tried to do it and sort of synthesize where we are in the market today, which obviously is very difficult to do.
Right.
Nobody has a crystal ball that can tell you when the next recession is going to be. But assuming that one does come, what asset classes can we get into that will weather the storm the best? So that we don't lose our shirts, on our first venture out.
Right.
And what would also be a good segue, in terms of what we want to do in the future. And sort of all directions pointed towards manufactured housing. As you know, there's an extremely large need for affordable housing in this country right now. You see it all over New York. It's constantly in the news. And not only in New York, LA, Miami, all these major cities have huge housing shortages and major issues with that. So the interesting thing about manufactured housing, which sort of caught our attention, was that there's a huge demand but very, very, very limited supply. And that supply is governed by the fact that no municipality will approve a new mobile home park across the country. In the past about 20 years, there's only been double-digit mobile home parks developed nationwide. And I would argue that more are being purchased and demolished to be developed into other things than are being built. So you have a diminishing supply and increasing demand, which creates for a very interesting sort of investment thesis where a lot of these things are run down. They're owned by mom and pops. There's a lot of value to be had there in sort of repurposing them, reinvesting into them, improving the quality. And there's also a huge institutional level sort of market, investment market for it that's been increasing in popularity over the last 5 years.
Because of the returns.
Because of the returns, but also there's just a lot of opportunity. Nobody's really touched it because it's not a glamorous asset class. So we looked at it and we said, we have an opportunity here to sort of get into the space, be those guys that assemble a portfolio of these things, 5,000 or 6,000 units, and sell it to, once we have a portfolio assembled, sell it to a Blackstone or a Carlyle group, because the Blackstones or the Carlyles of the world aren't the ones that want to, purchase one-off assets, assemble a portfolio, and do the value-add work. They want to purchase something turnkey, like your standard Class A high-rise in New York. So we saw an opportunity to be the sort of boots-on-the-ground guys that, really put in the effort to turn these things around, provide quality, affordable housing for people nationwide, and make a decent living along the way.
So tell me a little bit about those first days, like getting in, like, all right, you decided you're going to do this, quit your job, you're posting up somewhere as day 1 to day 5. What does that look like?
Presently we're working out of Nick's apartment in Nomad. So, we joked that we traded skyscraper views for kitchen views, because now we're literally working in a kitchen. And we've got our dual monitors set up, and we're just cranking out deals left and right in the kitchen. So I think, to answer your question though, when we first started working together, Nick and I both wanted to tackle every single thing that came our way from every single angle, and we found that we weren't doubling down on our strengths. We were just trying to manage everything, both of us. And so that was a really good lesson, I think, because what we ended up doing a couple months in, maybe even a couple weeks in, was just sit down and be like, look, what are you better at and what are you better at? And then we just focused on that. And so now we've got a pretty seamless process where, we'll bring in deal flow, we'll source, we'll canvas, and then someone who's better at underwriting, Nick, will underwrite, and then we'll just kind of go from there in terms of raising equity on a deal if we need to do that. Marketing, we've got our tasks set out now pretty well, and so we've come to a point, I think, after 6 months where that was our biggest hurdle, and I think we've pretty much overcome it now.
Okay, so you're running out of an apartment in Nomad.
Yes, sir.
And you're looking at mobile home parks all over the United States. How, for someone that wants to invest in this, how do you do that as someone that's not physically there?
Sure. I think part of it comes back to acquiring things at the right scale. So for something that's in the tri-state area, for example, we're looking at a bunch of stuff that's only 20, 30 miles outside of the city that's within arm's reach of us. So we could be there and be the sort of boots on the ground and have eyes on it every day. Anything that's out of the tri-state area or out of a reasonable driving distance, it's got to have scale. So we've got to be above 100 units. So that we can afford and have the economies of scale to have an on-site manager there. Not to say that, when we acquire something, even if it is large, Luke and I are probably going to be there for, the first month or two, assembling a new management team, just sort of getting the processes in order that are necessary to manage from a distance. So that will be a little bit of a growing pain, I'd imagine, once we do get there. But we've already started thinking of sort of processes to manage that.
Yeah, that's probably the hands down, I think, the hardest part of this industry, and probably any other facet of real estate, is the operations side. And that's something that we're very prepared for, which is part of the reason why, like he said, we're leveraging our location and we're targeting parks primarily in the tri-state area, up and down the East Coast. And anything outside of that type of realm needs to be, upwards of 100 plus pads.
There's also a bunch of technology, the rise of prop tech and everything, which I believe is a little bit of a bubble right now, but there are a handful of products out there that have, increased efficiencies exponentially in operations and management of mobile home parks, multifamily, commercial, that are allowing operators like ourselves to manage from a distance and really get a sort of a keen insight into what's going on in the day-to-day operations, again, from a distance.
Yep.
So I think the advent of all these technologies is really going to help our case as well.
Yep.
So not having been in this field and having just heard about it, like through what you were doing, how did you start sourcing deals?
At first, we actually listened to a lot of podcasts. There's 2 or 3 out there. Specifically, I'm thinking of Kevin Buck and Charles D. Hart, who had a very successful podcast. And that kind of provided a lot of guidance on the sourcing front. There's also, there's bigger pockets. There's a lot of websites. There's a lot of material out there if you look for it. So I think at first we were pretty conventional in our sourcing. I mean, we literally just, went to mhvillage.com, which is a pretty popular site. And we would just look up properties and we would call. Then there is the mailer strategy, right? You can export a lot of these addresses, which we weren't even doing early on. We were doing it manually. And then you send out mailers in large scale. Since that, we've kind of played with our sourcing model a little bit, and I think we've gotten much more creative. So now we're using technology like Sly Broadcast, where we can basically deliver 1,000 voicemails. If you start playing in the same location, hi, I'm interested in your park in Florida, call me back. You hit 1,000 owners, usually you'll get like a 5% response rate. And if they're calling back, they're interested.
Yeah.
We've also been playing with Reonomy a lot. We love Reonomy. So we've been targeting parks that might be facing foreclosure, that might have bad performing notes, parks that haven't been sold in 10 years, parks that haven't been refinanced in 10 years. So we've gotten pretty creative, and then I'd say that our favorite strategy as of late has been literally just showing up to parks. So it's not always the easiest thing getting in touch with ownership because of the operations that are usually in place. They're usually pretty antiquated. So when we try to get in touch with ownership, it's usually a property manager, right? Not really a decision maker.
Right.
So what we've started doing is we'll probably list about 10 to 15 parks within, call it 3 hours of each other. So maybe like a 20 to 30, 40 mile radius.
Okay.
And then we'll literally just plan out a trip for an entire day and we'll just knock on doors. And it sounds risky, and it is, because you might hit 7, 8, 9 and you don't get anything.
Right.
But if you connect with ownership on 1 or 2, it becomes pretty worthwhile.
Right. Because a face-to-face is always worth more than line communication.
Always, yeah.
And a lot of times we'll try to double up, so if it's somebody that we've called in the past and maybe they had interest but not right now, we'll show up there and just introduce ourselves. We're not walking in there and trying to push and say, hey, please sell to us.
Yeah.
It's more of, hey, we're Nick and Luca, we're targeting mobile home parks. We're in the market to purchase, so in the event that you're ready, we'd love to have that conversation with you, and just sort of getting to know them on a more personal level, so that when we do call them back again in the future, they put that the face to the name, and they remember who we are, and that helps tremendously in your sourcing. I'd imagine it helps in your business as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so much easier when you actually meet somebody versus DMing them.
Yeah.
But the DMing opens the door to the warm
100%.
intro. It makes it so much easier.
Exactly.
100%.
So have you guys actually? Well, let's rephrase this. Are you guys in contract or in the process or currently closed on something? Because I would imagine 6 months in, you may be on the verge, but I don't think necessarily done yet. Or you tell me.
It's a good question. I mean, I think that the typical measure that we've been playing with or that we've seen is 100 deals underwritten, seen, maybe even offered on, will usually equal 1 contract. And that's kind of what we've noticed. It's been our experience. See 100 deals, get 1.
Okay.
So we're actually in contract to purchase our first park. It's in New York. It's about 100 pads. And we had to see a lot of deals prior to getting to that. There were a lot of slam doors. There were a lot of deals where we were about to go into contract. And for whatever reason, we were expecting a signed contract. It just fell apart last minute. And so it's just been persistence, it's been resilience, but we are grateful to announce that we are in contract. And we also have another deal that we can kind of high level talk about in South Carolina. It's a multifamily property that we structured on a master lease, so it's kind of a value add play. We have an option to purchase. We'll probably be flying down, I think, next week to check it out.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that. You've identified, you're in those due diligence stages, right? Talk to me a little bit about raising money.
Sure. Yeah,
because you guys both come from a world that's a little different. Maybe you're on the other side of the table, but like not having that track record of executing.
Sure.
Talk to me about like what that's been like.
Sure. So raising money is, I actually kind of enjoy it because it gives you the opportunity to sort of go out and meet with other successful people who, maybe they're just diligent savers or maybe they've had a successful business career. It gives you an opportunity to sit down with them, sort of pick their brain as to what they're looking for, and then also pitch yourself, not only yourself but also the deal that you've come to them with. At the same time, it's obviously nerve-wracking. What if they shoot your deal down? What if because every investor I've found when you go to sit down with them, they're playing devil's advocate, which they rightfully should be,
right?
Because they want to uncover any flaws in your business plan or anything that could go wrong in the deal. And that always actually helps us refine sort of our business plan and our underwriting, and maybe take a step back and say, okay, maybe this isn't the best deal in the world, but how can we work around that? So again, really love the process of raising money. In this asset class, I think, given where we are in the market cycle, it's extremely, extremely difficult for anyone to find yield in New York or any of these other major markets. Multifamily and stuff in New York and Brooklyn is trading at a 4% return. If you're lucky. Whereas, for example, this deal that we're going to contract on, it's an 8% return going in, and we're projecting conservatively in year one to be at 12%. So while the cash flow is definitely higher, there's less appreciation to be had, as opposed to New York. But it's a safety position, it's a cash flow position. So for a lot of people who are fully invested in New York, it's sort of a nice alternative for them to have a little bit of a safety net where they could have more monthly cash flow coming in rather than just solely betting on appreciation like people do in New York. So far, I mean, there's a ton of capital out there that's chasing these things. The most difficult part is just finding the good deals. So it's
really not hard to finance because your returns are high enough.
It's not very difficult to.
And there's
to
enough
finance.
of spread where you guys can still make money.
Exactly. Obviously for us to make sense of a deal, it's got to have some scale so that we can keep the lights on, and we don't want to work for free, obviously. So we've been targeting larger opportunities, which sounds kind of crazy for people that are just for their first investment, but it actually provides a lot of benefits. You can partner with a larger operator. We bring it to them and maybe just take some equity in the deal, or just bring in a JV partner, a co-GP partner. So we've had a lot of success uncovering good deals recently in the past month or two. And we're just about to get into sort of the money raise process on the first one, which we're excited for. And we don't think we'll have any sort of issue, raising the capital. Of course, there's hiccups that come up along the way, but so just to talk about who our typical investor would be, it's sort of deal specific. I'd say in the $3 to $5 million deal range, we're probably going to be largely friends and family. You'll have a couple people come in with $100,000 or $50,000 a piece.
Because you're going to leverage it with that.
And we'll sort of syndicate the deal between, again, just friends and family for the first couple deals, which will allow us to sort of build our track record. And then we also have some sort of smaller family offices, institutions based out of New York that again are looking for yield, but want to see those 2 or 3 deals under your belt before they invest with you. So again, the first couple deals we'll do friends and family, and then hopefully grow it from there and start partnering with larger firms and scaling the size of the acquisitions.
So is that part of the reason why you stay in New York?
Part of the reason, we don't want to go to California for the first acquisition where we have to fly.
No, I mean as a base.
Yeah.
Oh, as a base?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look, this is where we're from. You know,
Okay.
this is where the majority of our relationships are. I mean, between Jersey and New York, that's where family, friends, capital, relationships from our past jobs. It's pretty much all here.
We also just love New York.
And we love New York. I
I
mean,
agree.
you know, we've been to a bunch of places,
I
but
agree.
we always come back here.
Yeah. The only other place to me that's close is London.
Yeah.
London,
London.
interesting. I lived in London
I
for
love
a
London.
couple months.
I
I don't
really.
share the same sentiment as you,
Okay.
but
I think a lot of
make
people,
chocolate and vanilla.
a lot of people get really sick of New York, at least in my experience. If you're from somewhere far away, like if you're from Florida or California, and you move to New York, it can be overwhelming because you can't just hop out of the city and go home on the weekend or
Right.
something.
Right.
You're sort of you feel stuck here,
mhm.
and that's part of the reason I think the Catskills and upstate, like we were talking about
Yeah, yeah.
before, is really coming back. But I think Luke and I are both lucky enough that we grew up a little bit outside of the city, 50 or 100 miles, and that provides us the ability that if we get sick of the city on the weekends, we can hop out of the city and
Right,
visit
yeah,
our
yeah.
parents or other family.
You guys
upstate
are lucky.
or
My
outside
parents
the
are in
city.
Queens.
Yeah.
So I go 10 minutes and I'm still in the same borough. But I get it. No, because I'm at a
Yeah.
point where like we were talking about earlier, I'm looking upstate just because there's a difference. There's a difference in like the air. There's a
Quality
difference
of
life.
in the speed. There's a difference in everything.
Absolutely.
When you leave the concrete jungle.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
So the plan is 5,000 to 6,000 units.
No, I mean 5. That's a nice
That's
number.
probably a 5 or 10 year view.
That's
yeah.
more
Okay.
like a 5 to 10 years.
Right. I didn't mean
But-
tomorrow. Like
I mean, look, if we're talking long term, I don't know. I mean, probably even more than that. But I think in the next 12 to 18 months, conservatively, I think probably about 1,000 units.
so it's like 7 to 10 deals.
Yeah, and it really depends, honestly, because we actually were looking at a couple portfolios over the last few months
Okay.
that if we had moved forward with them, I mean, one of them was like 700 pads,
Yep.
spread across 5 parks. So it really depends. It really depends on the deal.
If we're able to get one of those portfolios under our belt, I mean, we could hit
We'd be
2,000 units
three-quarter-
in
yeah,
18
Right.
months.
Very very
Uh,
quickly. Yeah.
But we're not going to just buy things just because they're large and we want to get to that number.
Right, right.
We're
It's
trying to
gotta make
scale
sense.
sensibly.
Yes.
It makes
Yeah.
sense.
We're not really in a hurry. We're here for the long term. I mean, we quit our jobs to pursue this full time, so we're really not going anywhere. And we understand that it's a marathon; it's not a sprint. So we're comfortable with that, I think.
So 6 months of looking at parks.
Yep.
Right. You had to have some crazy stories. Now, obviously, let's not talk specifically about the park, but like,
Well, we've probably got 20 that involve brokers, so we won't touch
won't talk about
those.
that.
Yeah, we won't talk.
we'll save that for another whole podcast.
Yeah, whole other
yeah.
podcast. But I'll try to. I don't know. Do you have anything that sticks out? I've got a few I'm thinking of.
Off the top of my head, I know we have a ton, but there's so many. It's
So
difficult.
So I was in New Jersey to talk about this. We were. How do we find this park? Okay, so my best friend who I used to live with, Bobby, used to play basketball in high school with a kid who lived in the mobile home park, and his mom owned it.
Okay.
And so I had info because he told me, Bobby, the owner lives in the park. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, that's good info to know. So it's in New Jersey. It's very well located, not too far from where my parents live. So I took a day and I went there, and we documented the whole thing. And I get there and I find the son. There's like 250 pads at this place. Like, I'm asking tenants, where does the son live? Who's the property manager? They're like, oh, he drives a black Cadillac. Okay. They wouldn't tell me where he lived though. So I'm going around the entire park looking for a black Cadillac. There must be 20 of them. I finally find one that, has tinted windows. I'm like, younger kid, this is probably it. So I find the kid. He's like, yeah, my mom, she's not here right now. She'll probably be back in a couple days, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I gotta get back to New York. So I'm like, let me just wait it out. Like, maybe I'll just, whatever. I get on the phone with Nick, I tell him what's going on. And, 15 minutes pass. And this huge ass pickup truck. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. This thing must have been like 4 or 5 feet off the ground. And it's like, completely decked out, whatever. Pulls up in front of the office. And I'm just parked outside. And this lady gets out. She must be in her 50s. And it turns out that that's the owner. So I go in and I talk to her for a little bit. long story short, it turns out that she is entertaining offers on the sale of the park, and we're moving forward with that right now as we speak. We're actually going to go back when we leave here and continue underwriting. So, but just the type of people you meet, in this industry, owners especially, it's always never a dull day. Let's just say that.
It's very funny because we come from the New York City real estate world where you're typically, when you're negotiating a deal, you're in a conference room,
right?
Or you're in a, nice high-rise office building or something like that. Whereas this deal we're in contract on, we literally negotiated the contract in a garage, sitting next to an excavator.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's a completely different type of deal, but it allows
you. Get their number, they would have cut up some space.
You're not necessarily dealing with sophisticated real estate people, which we're not trying to take advantage of people.
Does that complicate the deal?
It does in some senses because people don't people that aren't real estate people don't keep records that they should be. So there's a lot of digging that you have to do to uncover what's really there. But the benefit of it is it allows you to get extremely creative. We pride ourselves on trying to create creative transactions. Not
so
just
what do you mean? Like without getting into your secrets, sort of where somebody sees a difficult opportunity, we see that as a way to get creative and figure out a solution to solve either our problem with the park or the seller's problem with the park. So I'll give you, one example. There's a park in upstate New York that we've been looking at. It's extremely well located, growing town with a need for affordable housing. And these people have owned the park for 30 or 40 years. They're older. And they've just driven the park into the ground. I mean, water and sewer issues, the homes are old and, they're not managing it properly. It looks like, there's a difference. We call them, Nice Park is a mobile home community. A park that hasn't been kept up is a trailer park. There really is a difference. So we see opportunity. I mean, it's very well located, great covered land play. And it just needs sort of attention and a little bit of CapEx dollars. So these guys don't want to sell because they're afraid of taxes. They don't want to pay capital gains taxes. They're older and they live off the income pretty much. So we're right now structuring a master lease with an option to purchase, which essentially allows us to master lease the entire property from them, typically at a small discount to what they're actually pulling in. So let's just say for high-level sake, the property generates $100,000 a year in income for those people. We'll offer them $75,000, but they don't have to lift a finger. So we'll cut them a check for $75,000 for the year, and then their tenants essentially become ours. So we're now in charge of rent collection, management, repairs, things like that. It allows us to go in, sort of turn the park around, increase the income, and then we are able to pocket the difference between what we're paying them and the income that that we create at the park and the value that we create at the park. Now we also have an option to purchase the park. So when we execute a master lease, we'll have a predetermined number. We'll say we'll give you $75,000 a year and master lease your park, but we'll have the option to purchase at X price at some point along this 10-year period. So the benefit to that is, if the park's worth $1 million now, in terrible condition, we can go in there, master lease it, fix the park up. Maybe it's worth $1.5 million, but we have the option to purchase it at $1 million. So we just created $500,000 in equity for ourselves. We can go to the bank and a lot of times get 90 or 100% financing on a transaction like that. So that's one example of sort of just getting creative, and instead of just saying, this person's not going to sell and walking away, figuring out what their needs are and how we can provide them with a solution.
And on the debt side too, there's a lot of room for us to get creative, being that these are usually mom and pop owners. And again, we've come across transactions where there's no rent roll, there's no income and expense, everything's just kind of put down on paper by hand. And so when you go to a bank with that type of financial history, it is very tough to get financing, I can tell you firsthand. So what we've been doing a lot is we'll offer seller financing. So that alleviates the owner's tax burden, right? If they have to pay a capital gains tax, there's no tax when you hold a mortgage. So basically, we would put the property up as collateral, and then they hold the note on the property for, call it 5 years, maybe 3 years, until we stabilize. and then we would refinance the property conventionally and pay them off principal plus interest. So we've seen a lot of luck with that as well, and again, it's serving for both of us, for us as buyers and for them as sellers.
Mm-hmm. Deal 1 is in contract.
Yep.
Mhm.
It seems like deal 2 is quickly coming. Do you?
Yeah.
And there's no end in sight from what you guys are talking about, at least in doing this and in doing it yourself. What's like the bigger picture, like in the back of your head?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I don't think, and granted maybe it becomes a piece of what it is, but I don't think it's the end all and be all. So like what is the crazy pie in the sky or the back of the head 10-year, 7-year plan?
I'll give you sort of the maybe the 5 or 6, and then Luke, you want to give me
Sure.
6 to 12 or something. So part of the reason that we're looking at these opportunities is, number one, historically they weather recessions very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our hope, that we're getting into an asset class that we're not going to have to give back to the bank in a recession like some of these people that are overpaying for multifamily will. Also, we're trying to be strategic in the acquisitions that we pick, insofar that they're well located. We're looking for stuff that eventually 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line will develop. Say we purchase a park along a retail corridor that's growing in an area that's growing. Eventually, maybe 20 years down the line, the highest and best use isn't going to be a mobile home park. We'll have 10 acres where the mobile home park once sit that we could develop multifamily or office or retail on that site. So I think in the short term, in the sort of 5-year term, we're looking at this as a way to sort of build a portfolio of a couple thousand units, which will provide us with both cash flow and also allow us to build equity in the portfolio.
Right.
And then I think we'll really get selective, and maybe once we create that value, after say 5 years, start selling off some of those assets that we don't want to hold long term. And then Luke can sort of go into the plan after that.
So a couple things stick out from that question. So first of all, I didn't really know the industry that well when I first heard about it, and so I was just kind of like, I don't know, until I actually saw the numbers, I was just a little bit skeptical. I was still kind of caught up in that New York City mentality, which is like, the shinier, the taller, the more expensive, the better. And what we started learning was, through looking at the numbers and doing our research, is that there's a lot of players who play in this space, and they just do it kind of behind the scenes. So Clayton Homes, for instance, is the largest manufacturer of mobile homes. They're owned by Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett is literally the largest manufacturer of mobile homes. He's also the largest lender. He provides financing on these mobile homes. Sam Zell, who was recently just traded, he sold a building for $100 and something million bucks.
180, I think. Yeah.
He's got a REIT that he's got a business that's probably $5-6 billion of his net worth, and he's been playing in this space for, probably call
Since
it
the 80s.
Yeah, since the 80s. So there's a lot of people out there who play in the space. You just might not hear about it. So even long term, again, I don't think we're going anywhere. I think that we'll probably start expanding in different directions, but I don't see us ever really moving away from the mobile home space. I think what will happen, though, just based on what we're seeing in the industry and the market, is that the mobile home in and of itself will change, the structure. What we're seeing a lot of is tiny homes, more aesthetic mobile homes, manufactured homes that are more modular in construction. So I think what we envision, 15, 20 years out, might even be ground up development of mobile home parks, but kind of, like I said, coming at it from a different angle, which hasn't happened in the industry. This industry is very antiquated. The model is very old. It hasn't really been revolutionized that much. Even just Nick and I, launching a social media campaign has taken people by surprise, because no one's doing it. And so I think that's really our plan, is to just kind of revolutionize the industry a little bit. And then obviously, we definitely want to branch out into multifamily development. We love multifamily product. If we had the opportunity to develop something down the line, which I think we will, I think we'll be positioned to do that, we'll definitely pursue that as well. And then we'll scale. we're
Right.
obviously going to bring people in. We're going to have a team, and
Right,
Nick and I
right.
will be handling more of the managerial standpoint.
Right, you guys won't be in the park for the first month.
Right. So, we'll see. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, we enjoy it.
We enjoy it.
So could you actually see yourselves living in one of these parks that you visited?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we're going to be doing it pretty soon, honestly.
I mean, there's some parks out there, again, they get a very bad stigma, and that's why you're not seeing them developed, because
Right.
somebody, developer proposes a new mobile home park, and, Joe Schmo goes to the town board hearing and says there's a trailer park, next to my house, and, it's killing my property value, it's run down, and that's that classic mom and pop owner that never reinvested into the park, never really kept up with it. And those type of operators give the industry a bad rap, when in reality it's one of the best forms of affordable housing on the market. It's the only one where you can sort of get into the home ownership game, at a very, very low cost. So looking at it from a high level, yeah, absolutely. We would, we know several other operators who actually live in the parks that they're redeveloping. They'll travel around to the parks that they own, live in them while they sort of turn them around. And we've actually put offers in on parks that are super, super nice. I mean, in New Jersey, one's on a lake, super nice houses, upkept very, very well. I wouldn't have any problem living there. But again, society still holds that sort of stigma against them as trailer parks. But you go down to Texas and areas like that where there are newer, nicer mobile home parks. There's pools, community centers, gyms. I mean, you name it, everything. Paved driveways, backyards, fire pits, fully amenitized. It's like a multifamily building, except your tenants actually own the home that they live in. You just own the land underneath it.
Yeah, Florida as well has some, amazing product in terms of 55 and over.
Golf courses, it's amazing.
Yeah, they're high-end luxury. I think didn't Matthew McConaughey live in...
Matthew McConaughey apparently lived in a mobile home park in Texas, like a high-end
high-end
park.
There's also...
How about Montauk?
Yeah, I was going to say, so there's obviously a couple outliers that aren't exactly the space we play in. There are the luxury mobile home parks. There's one in Montauk called, what is it, Montauk Shores, I think?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, where you've got... Again, these aren't really being operated as mobile homes, but it is a mobile home park. It's more like, think, your hedge fund manager who has a $30 million home in Montauk, but wants a little tiny home close to the beach where he can go get changed, or something like that. But these homes are,
that's
you get that, right? So,
huge problem.
It's like between $300K to like 3 or 4 million for a mobile home.
I mean, they have like mahogany walls.
Again, it's a different
Outrageous.
space.
Right, of course.
Yeah, but in terms of inspiration and just understanding like what we could maybe do and bring, again, always we want to be at an affordable level. That's kind of our mandate here. But getting inspired from these parks, there's also parks in California where Malibu, again, you're surrounded by $60-80 million mansions. And you've got a mobile home park where your average mobile home goes between $400K to like $4.5 million for a mobile home.
That's insane to me.
Yeah.
It's wild.
But it's real estate. It's supply and demand.
Listen,
There's always going to be, and the bar will move as the market changes.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed.
So before we wrap, is there anything you guys want to share?
No, feel free to reach out to us. We always love chatting with people that are involved in the industry or interested in getting involved in the industry, interested in investing. We think the asset class is here to stay, and it's really making a big change over the next 5-10 years, and we hope to be a big part of that change. So go to our website, pioneercommunities.com, or just reach out to Luca and I on Instagram. We're very accessible. We'd love to
tag you guys all up. And
cool. Yeah, just at Pioneer Communities. We're very accessible. So happy to connect.
Cool. Well, listen, thank you so much for chatting, and best of luck. But I believe you guys will probably be very successful.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Mike.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
See you guys soon.